What's going on, guys? Josh here from Moment Productions. I'm an LA-based filmmaker, so if you're new to my channel, make sure you're subscribed with those notifications turned on because we talk everything about filmmaking. In today's video, I'm going to show you my free LUT pack. It's actually a vintage black and white LUT pack, so if you're interested in getting this pack, make sure you check out the link down below. I'm going to show you how to use this LUT pack and how it can benefit you, and we're going to go over some color correction and color grading in Final Cut Pro. Let's get right into it. So here we are in Final Cut Pro. This is the most basic workspace or basic layout we have of the program. Now, if we want to get to some color correcting, we need to go into the Window tab and then go to Workspaces and Color and Effects. You'll notice how everything will start to change. We'll actually start to see some RGB scopes here. And these are going to help benefit us when it comes down to color correcting in each color space. So red, green, and blue. Now the question is, why do you need to color correct? Well, my vintage LUT pack will work for any footage, but some of your footage may be darker, brighter, it might have a different color science, and overall just the color in general is going to look different from the footage I have from my camera. So it's always good to color correct your footage first and then drop in the LUTs. So let's go ahead and start messing around with color correction. So here's our first clip of this woman here drinking some coffee on this beautiful sunny day. So let's first off go over some of the scopes here. So basically this Luma waveform helps us determine whether or not the clip is way too bright. Here we can see that it's clipping a little bit here. It's trying to go above 100, so we're gonna have to bring it down overall. So this is what we're gonna do. We're gonna go ahead and highlight the clip. I'm gonna go over to the color inspector here. And we have multiple different corrections here. We have the overall master slider for brightness. We have the shadows, midtones, and highlights. So if you notice, as we mess around with these sliders, the waveforms begin to change, and so does the overall image. Now, too high, you can already start to see that details are being lost in the clouds. Remember, if you're dealing with clouds, they are white. So yes, they are going to seem overexposed, but the best way to determine whether they are or not is if you see any details. So as I drop down the slider here, we can see all of the details in the clouds here. So overall, this is pretty good for the highlights. All right, so the midtone slider here, we can adjust it, we can play around with it. You can obviously start to see the waveform start to change, but it really doesn't benefit us at all. As we keep messing around with the midtones, I think it was already properly exposed here. We have some details here in the reds and the blues. We're pretty good here with our exposure for the most part. As you can see here, as I mess around with the shadow slider, we can brighten up her portion here, but it really starts to fade the image, and I don't really want that, especially with the LUTs that we're going to be applying. So I'm gonna reset that by double clicking on it. And it'll just go right back to the center, and we can obviously mess around with the overall exposure of the whole entire shot. As you can see here on the Luma waves here, we are going way above 100, therefore we're overexposing the shot. We want to stay under 100, just about there. So this shot was already, for the most part, properly exposed. Now I want to focus on clips that were not color corrected here, so I'm going to go ahead and drag and drop this Sony S-Log clip. It's really flat, not colored or touched up at all. So I'm going to select the clip. I'm going to add a color board, and this will allow us to adjust the overall exposure in the shadows, midtones, and highlights. So let's check our Luma wave here. We are pretty low on the highlights, we're pretty good on the midtones, and pretty good on the shadows. So let's adjust the highlights. Right there. Okay, so that's overall where we want to be. We're going above 100 right here, so let's adjust it just a tad. Right there. Very minor adjustments can do a lot. All right. And then let's go ahead and mess around with the reds, greens, and blues here. We definitely need to add some saturation to this shot. So I'm going to go to Hue and Saturation, and this will allow us to change the color of the image, and it will allow us to adjust the saturation, which is basically the intensity of the color. So we can apply different shape masks, we can apply different color masks, or we can overall just change the whole entire image. Now, if I wanted to change this person's skin tones to maybe brighten them up or slightly change the colors, all we would have to do is go right up here, add a color mask, and go to the skin tone and just select it. And you can see a little mask appear, and it will show you what part of the shot will be affected by the change that you're making in the hue and the saturation. And you can adjust these colors pretty easily. So you can also use the eyedropper here to make this effect only affect that color in that mask. Now, after we select that skin color, you can see how it's highlighted here in our graph, and that tells us exactly where that color is in the color spectrum. And you can mess around with this graph by dragging these points up and down, and you can see how the colors in his skin are changing. Now, don't forget, we made a color mask for this selected effect, which is the hue and saturation curves. If we want an adjustment that will affect the whole entire image, we have to select the hue and saturation curves again in the drop-down menu, and this will add another hue and saturation curve. Right there. Now if we make any changes here, it's going to affect the whole image. And again, you can reset the effect by going to the back arrow here. Now, as I mentioned earlier, this is a flat or log profile, so we need to add some saturation into this shot. So I immediately know that I need to go down to hue versus saturation, otherwise known as color versus saturation. So we want to intensify the colors in this shot. So I want it to affect the whole entire clip, so I'm not going to add any specific masks. However, I do want the overall image to pop, especially when it comes down to the reds and the pinks. So I'm just gonna make a little point here by double clicking and bringing it up. And it's automatically going to saturate those colors in the shot. And let's saturate the greens a little bit more as well. We don't want it to look cartoony, so just constantly keep your eyes on the shot. You can also desaturate it, but we don't want to be doing that. Just a tad. There we go. And what about the reds here? Desaturate it. You can saturate it right about there. All right, so I'm pretty happy with the overall colors in this shot. Now let's drop in our LUT. So I'm going to go to our effects panel here. Then I will type in LUT into the search bar at the bottom here. And we can apply our own custom LUT. This is not a plugin for Final Cut Pro. It's already built into Final Cut Pro, so you won't have to buy anything. Just drag and drop it. Then go to the Effects tab, and let's find the LUT. I'm going to put in my faded black and white LUT. Boom, that's it. That faded look really accentuates that whole vintage look. Now, if we want to make the shot even slightly more cinematic, we can actually insert some letterboxes. And I actually have a template pack for letterboxes for free, so you can download those. I'll leave a link for you in the description box below, so make sure you check it out. So check this out. We're gonna just go ahead and drop in some letterboxes. These are PNG files, so all we have to do is just drag and drop them into our library and just drag and drop it onto the timeline. And boom, there's our letterbox. Now his head is clipped out of the shot, so we need to adjust it. So all we have to do is highlight the clip and lift up the clip in the Y-axis. So go to transform and just bring it up. Boom. And let's play it back. And it's as simple as that. Remember, the links are in the description box, so make sure you check them out, and I'll see you in the next video. Peace.